Gone up 27% in 2025 alone, and we are just halfway through this year. We could see the price of gold hit $120,000 per kilo by the end of this year, and Captain Traore is taking full advantage of it. Ladies and gentlemen, the nation of Burkina Faso has completed a sweep of mining companies they targeted from August of last year. They have taken over 5 mining companies since June 12 of this year. 2 of those 5 were operational and 3 held an exploration license. The 2 are Wagnion Gold SA and Samafo Bongo SA. Each held 90% of ownership of the mines, whereas Burkina Faso held just 10% ownership in each of the mines. Today, Burkina Faso owns 100% of both mines. The 3 exploration companies have their licenses cancelled and taken over by the state of Burkina Faso. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Burkina Faso and to meet Captain Traore, the very few of African leaders or heads of state and leader who says a thing and actually gets it done. These are interesting times, and so let's get into the nitty-gritties of this story. Let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to Tuntum Network. Be sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell for more of my videos. Now, in less than 1 year, Captain Ibrahim Traore has achieved his mission of taking back the mines which had signed ridiculous agreements with previous government of Burkina Faso. The message he's sending now is super clear. We can do it ourselves, and therefore it is no more business as usual. Ladies and gentlemen, did you know that because of this action taken by Traore, in the first quarter of 2025 alone, the Burkina Faso government collected 11 tons of gold? 2024 was 8 tons, and this year, first quarter is 11 tons. 11 tons of gold is nearly $1.1 billion US with current prices. I used to work in the mines, and so I want to take this opportunity to share these secrets with you, ladies and gentlemen. The foreign companies that operate mines in Africa are never honest with their production. I'll be honest with you. They've never declared the true recoveries of the product. There is a figure which is only disclosed to the investors, and there is this other figure that is accounted for to the state in which they operate. Talking about African countries, most times the capital requirements they are supposed to meet in order to be given permits are not met. They come in pretending to have the capital ready for operations, but in actual fact, they get so much of the capital from the very land in Africa from which they get the fund in order to start mining. They come in as an exploration company, and before you know it, they have acquired the capital they will need from the very exploration activities to begin operations. Ladies and gentlemen, did you know that there are exploration companies working in different parts of Africa who have held the exploration licenses for more than 10 years? I'm being honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. Don't feel sorry for any of these companies taken over by Burkina Faso government. Do not. Because Captain Traore understands mining very, very well. He holds a master's degree in geology. He's practically a mining engineer. These companies deliberately hold on to the exploration licenses for years, which allows them to do all sorts of things disguised as exploration while making millions from us. With the exploration license, ladies and gentlemen, they don't have to pay certain taxes and royalties, and the standard workers' salaries, they don't have to pay it. They keep moving from one site to the other, pretending to explore, but actually mining on the surface. I know all these tricks. Many of these exploration companies only do that to sell their reports to other mining companies for millions at the expense of poor African countries or ignorant African countries. Multinational mining companies in Africa are not trustworthy when it comes to their profits. Many times they quietly transfer ownership of the mines to other companies without the knowledge of the state until when the new owners are about to walk in. Ladies and gentlemen, their profits are often repatriated to their headquarters abroad with little reinvestment in host countries. They constantly underdeclare their books to avoid paying the right taxes, and they take advantage of vulnerable countries to pay relatively lesser fees in royalties, especially in Africa. In some instances, they even ask for tax holidays for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, these multinational companies never play fair. On top of all of this is the wage difference compared to other countries. Take, for instance, Australian and Canadian mining companies in Africa. The salaries and benefits of employees with similar qualifications and job description vary completely based on the country where they work, ladies and gentlemen. A mining engineer in Canada may take home about $15,000 per month, and the same position held by an engineer working for the sister company in Burkina Faso may take home half of that money. Meanwhile, you find out the African worker working more hours and more effectively than the one in Canada. The one reason that has made this a common practice in Africa is because many of such deals, these mining deals, are signed without public disclosure or parliamentary approval. Most times, these multinational companies collude with politicians, the elite politicians of the country, to sign such agreements that benefits the politicians personally at the expense of national interests. Now, when that happens, ladies and gentlemen, the priority of these politicians is on what they are getting from these contracts and not the plight of the local workers nor what the state gets. This is one of the few times where a leader of an African country has stepped in to change the ownership of the mines to benefit the country. Because in most cases, African politicians are rather trying to do all that's possible to keep the multinational companies here because of the benefits they get individually. They never consider running the mines themselves, ladies and gentlemen. They don't want to burden themselves with the management of a mine and the workers and making it profitable. They don't want to get into that. At this point, I've just realized why Africa hasn't moved much in the last 60 years. The African leadership is lazy and not work-oriented. Let me explain, ladies and gentlemen. They don't want to work. They want to supervise only. And even with that, they want to do it from the comfort of their air-conditioned offices. They want to sit back and wait for private companies and people to go to work and take taxes. They themselves are not working on any projects that requires their direct participation, ladies and gentlemen. So when the people aren't working and local businesses are not doing well and these multinational companies aren't producing, they have nothing to depend on their own, ladies and gentlemen. This is the totality of Africa's failure. African governments don't own farms. That is the truth. No farms, no mines. They don't own any production lines nor retail outlets. They are just running around with sirens and motorcades as though they are busy going to do something important. But in actual sense, it could be just going in for lunch, ladies and gentlemen. From Monday to Sunday, their motorcades are always busy running up and down. But there is nothing productive coming out of all that business. So what were they busy for, ladies and gentlemen? It had to take people like Traore in a space of 3 years to expose the non-performance of our leaders. Now, some of them are waking up at this point. We don't need you to talk big at this point. We need you to run industries. We need you to run production lines and ensure that the people can depend on you, ladies and gentlemen. Leave your offices and the conferences. That's not where the jobs are. The real jobs are on the sun and on the field. Get busy with something productive other than meetings and conferences. If you had industries to run, you wouldn't have all that time to spend a whole day in a conference. Wherever and whenever I see them in these conferences in their three-piece suits, I just know nothing is happening. These things don't fool us any longer, ladies and gentlemen. Get to work, for that is what the people voted you in for. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take this opportunity to thank every one of you for the support. Sometimes I just wonder to myself, where are all these people watching me from and the faces behind these comments? I wonder to myself. I only see names on the comments, but not faces. Maybe we should get a platform to have an online conference from time to time. It is weird. I'm just a local guy in Accra doing my small thing in my corner, and from all over the world, from Africa especially, we are getting all this traction. Thank you so much for the support and for helping us share the content. I want to thank you for the continued support, and to those who are watching for the first time, I will encourage you to subscribe and click on the bell to get the prompts to all my incoming videos. Thank you for taking time to watch this one. I'll come your way again with another one very soon. Until then, God bless Africa and God bless the captain of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore. It is bye-bye for now.